يا راغبا في كل علم نافع.
ينمو العلم ويتقدم بتقنياته ومجالاته، ومعه نطور أدواتنا في تقديم العلم الشرعي. أكاديمية
زاد أكاديمية ينبوعها صاف ليروي غلة الظمآن، ومكارم الأخلاق ندرسها معا، أدب وتربية على الإحسان. بشرى لنا زاد أكاديمية للعلم كالأزهار في البستان.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Continuing with the subject of the etiquettes in the Islamic education level 3 and the etiquettes to be observed in buying and selling and in markets, which is something that is very important, especially with the rulings that as Muslims we need to learn it and to ask the people of knowledge so that we don't fall into what is haram in matters of riba or deception and the like of this. One of these etiquettes to be observed before we talk about some specific manners related to the seller versus the buyer is to be at ease and to be forgetful. As the Prophet ﷺ said, رحم الله رجلا سمحا إذا باع وإذا اشترى وإذا اقتضى. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy upon a man that is samhan, someone that is pleasant when he sells, when he buys, when he's seeking judgment and things of that nature in disputes. To be at ease, not to be rigid and not to be greedy in every matter. It's also recommended to al-iqala, which is one of the things that is used if someone purchased something and once they departed, that means the sale is final. But it's something recommended if he comes back and he says, can you please return the item? And even though he has no rights to do that, but you would do that for him, this is something that is recommended unless it's a mandatory thing by the law that in the land that a person lives in, of course, then it has to be. And it's part of the shurut, part of the khiyar, or part of the conditions in buying and selling. If it's already known that the buyer has, say for example, 14 days to return the merchandise, it's already known. So he knows that when he's purchasing. So if he comes within that period, he has the right to return it as long as the conditions are met and so on. But if it's something that is beyond these things that has been agreed upon, then it's recommended also for the person to take the merchandise back, as the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man aqala musliman, aqala Allahu athratahu yawm al-qiyamah." Whoever relieve a Muslim from these obligations, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would relieve him from his difficulties in the day of al-qiyamah. So this is part of the good manners that a person would have, not as a mandatory thing. To write down the debt, especially in something that is going to be deferred, because this is a debt that has to be recorded. Otherwise, people might fall into disputes. And there's the longest verse in the Quran, which is Ayatul Dain. And to have something observed so that the rights are not to be ruined. To give lots of charity, especially when people are, in the market and so on. And there's so many different things that people might say wrong. As the Prophet ﷺ, he said, إن هذه السوق يخالطها اللغو والكذب فشوبوها بالصدقة. These markets, there's so much lagw, vain talk and lying and so on. So mix it with sadaqah, with charity, that you give charity for the sake of Allah. Some of the etiquettes to be observed by the seller, specific for the seller, one of which is to stay away from swearing. And it's haram, of course, if a person is lying. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said 3 types of people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not speak to them in the day of judgment. وَلَا يَنظُرُ إِلَيْهِمْ وَلَا يُزَكِّيهِمْ وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ. Does not look at them, does not purify them, and they will have a painful punishment in the hereafter. Warning severely from these types of actions, one of which is وَالْمُنَفِّقُ سِلْعَتَهُ بِالْحَلِفِ الْكَاذِبِ. The one that would sell his merchandise with lying while swearing. Swearing, lying, that this is what its price is for, lying. Or it says, Wallahi, I got it with this price, when he's lying. Then this is something that is a major sin. And of course also al-muzbil wal-mannan, the one that drags his garment and the one that reminds the poor of his favors and his charity unto him. So this is, if it's haram, this is a major, major sin. It's haram, of course. But also, if a person swears, even if he's truthful, you know, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Al-halifu manfaqatun lis-sil'a, mamhaqatun al-barakah." That means, if a person swears, if the seller swears, yes, this helps him maybe to sell his merchandise, but it takes away the barakah, takes away the blessings in which a person is in need of it. So a person should stay away from swearing whatsoever in buying and selling. So this is as other things that the Prophet ﷺ warned us, you know, that we should be away from. Also, it's haram for the seller to deceive and to cheat or to hide a defect in the item that he's selling. When the Prophet ﷺ, he passed by someone was selling food, and it's like a heap of food, the Prophet ﷺ put his hand inside and he felt wetness inside. That means what that seller is putting outside is what's best, the best dates, for example, and inside it's wet, it's rotten, or it's not as good as the ones on top, which is, everybody does this except for those who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy upon. What they put in front of people is what is best, but when you go deep, it might be different. So he said, "What is this, O owner of the food?" He said, "The rain afflicted it, O Prophet of Allah." He said, أَفَلَا جَعَلْتَهُ فَوْقَ الطَّعَامِ كَيَرَهُ النَّاسِ مَنْ غَشَّ فَلَيْسَ مِنِّي. He said, "Shouldn't you made it on top of the food so that people would see it?" And he said, "Whoever cheats, he's not from me." So that means it's important for a person to be fair to the people and not just to show what is good and then he gets from the inside or from underneath something of a different level of goodness as what people saw and they were purchasing based on that. And if someone has been cheated, he has the right, of course, religiously to return it back and to break the contract and to have his money back because he's been deceived. Also, the seller has to make sure that if something that is weighed, to be weighed with very specific measures and to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to be warned severely from those who would cheat on the balance. We have messengers of Allah was sent to warn people from cheating on the balance, like the Prophet Shu'aib alayhi salam. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warned those who make tatfif. Whenever they sell to people, they would cheat in the balance. Whenever they purchase from people, they want their balance to be full. And this is so unfair from the human beings. So cheating in whatever measures that they're selling with or how they do it. Also, when it comes to profit, you know, they teach you that if you're a successful person, that you have to maximize profit. That's not the case in the deen of Islam. Yes, you need to have profit, but to be moderate in it. The goal is not for you to be the richest man in the whole world and you make people suffer as a result of this. So, but to be moderate in matters of profit, to be away from the fact that a person would take something, the monopoly that some people they do, or which they would make sure that they're the only ones that have the merchandise and they would manipulate the prices as a result of that. And they would withhold an item from people to purchase till the prices goes up and then they sell it. All of these types of things are cheating and using the needs of the people, those who would buy something, and they would increase the price of it in a way that it doesn't fit or it's not worthy, or the value of it is far more than what it is. All kinds of anything that comes into the category of cheating. And that's why you would find governments, they would add more and more of these instructions and restrictions because of the widespread of cheating. And of course to benefit and to be there for both the buyer and the seller. You know, people cheating, and you can find all kinds of things nowadays. This merchandise is made in such and such country when it's not. Just because if it's written on it a certain country, then it would sell more. And it's not. And people are cheating. Or they would say this is an authentic and original part, for example, when it's not. You know, things of that nature, this is something that is haram, and it can cause so much harm and even death in some cases when it comes to cars and the like of this. So one of the things that is important to observe is the subject of at-tas'ir. At-tas'ir is when something or a merchandise or an item is given a specific price, and to force the people by the authority not to price it more than that specific price. What's the ruling of it? In principle, it's not permissible. You know, unless there's harm and the people are causing harm to the needs of the people. So that's why it's permissible when there is need for it, especially the essential that people are in need of. And if the people, those who are in trade, are making manipulation to the prices and things like this, then the authorities, of course, they have the right to specify a specific price to avoid this. So this is in general. The same thing when it comes to selling haram. It's haram to sell haram, even if it's selling it to the non-Muslims. People, those who sell alcohol, and they say, well, we're selling it to the non-Muslims. No, it's not permissible. It's haram to sell it. لعن الله اليهود والنصارى لعن الله اليهود حرمت عليهم الشحوم فباعوها وأكلوا أثمنها وإن الله عز وجل إذا حرم أكل شيء حرم ثمنه. Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, he said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cursed the Jews when something was forbidden for them, the fat of the meat, so they sold it and they took the money and they used it. And he said, alayhi salatu wasalam, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade something, if He forbade for us to eat something, He would forbid the price of it or the money that comes from it. إذا حرم الله شيئا حرم ثمنه أو بيعه. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade something, He also forbade selling it. So this is not permissible whatsoever, even if it's in the land where there's non-Muslims and things like this. The same thing with riba, usury, or gambling, or things like this. And not to say, well, that's the law of the land. It's not permissible to sell, when it comes to selling or bargaining, when someone else is trying to purchase. And this is where the Prophet ﷺ, he said, لا يبيع الرجل على بيع أخيه. If someone is purchasing something and someone else comes in and he says, I will give it to you cheaper than this, that's not permissible for that second person to do. إلا أن يأذن, even unless he's given the permission. And the same thing when a person is purchasing. And this is when a person purchased something and someone comes and says, hey, if you return it, I'll give it to you the cheaper price. That's not permissible, of course. This has caused people to have enmity and things of that nature. So this is some of the etiquettes that is related to the seller. And this is brief, otherwise there's so many rulings in the books of fiqh that relates to this, and people have to have the knowledge of it. That's why, as you see, if someone decides to get into the business of buying or selling, then he needs to learn the rulings of buying and selling so that he avoid what is haram. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from what is haram. Next, inshallah ta'ala, we'll talk about some of the etiquettes or the manners that is related to the purchaser or the one that buys. صلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
يا راغبا في كل علم نافع
ينمو العلم ويتقدم بتقنياته ومجالاته، ومعه نطور أدواتنا في تقديم العلم الشرعي. أكاديمية زاد
أكاديمية ينبوعها صاف ليروي غلة الظمآن، ومكارم الأخلاق ندرسها معا، أدب وتربية على الإحسان. بشرى لنا زاد أكاديمية للعلم كالأزهار في البستان.